Hey class, Mr. Mao here. Today we're going to look at line conventions. So these are line types that engineers have agreed on. Convention means that they kind of got together and all over the world have said, all right, this type of line means this. So you're going to set up in your notebook. We've got this handout here that you're going to glue in, and we're going to point to different line types. And on the next page, you can kind of make a list, a key of what those line types are. Now, this is sort of just a made-up part here that's showing you different types of lines. So I've got a 3D printed piece here of the thing. So you can see it's got these holes here in the middle and a hole in the back that you can't see from the front. But we've sort of cut away a piece of it to allow us to see inside, and that's what you see here. So we'll point that out at a few places here. So like I said, different styles and thicknesses mean different things to engineers, and this is sort of agreed on, so everybody that looks at a technical drawing understands what that line means. So the first type is a construction line. So this is a really lightly drawn line that's used to guide somebody's drawing. And you can see here, right, this isn't actually part of the object, but if I wanted to get this a circular shape, I could draw this box here to help me draw that circle there. So it's not actually part of the object. It's just drawn in to help guide the person who's making the shape. And we generally don't erase those after we're done. It kind of shows like, hey, this was part of a rectangle that we circled off. So those are usually left behind. And the other thing is, this video, please pause it to get these definitions down in your notebook if I go too fast. That's kind of the idea, is that you can pause and get these at your own pace. Okay, so next up we have an object line. So that is a thick, dark line that kind of defines the edge of the object. Those are some of the most important in a drawing. So that is just showing kind of the border, the edge. It shows where an object is. An interesting thing on this, right, we've got these hidden holes here. So we're going to talk about a hidden line next, but on the cutaway, we notice this is a dark object line because we can see it where it's cut away, but on this one we can't. Okay, so we see object lines all over these drawings here. So next up, like I was saying, those hidden lines, those show things that are hidden that you can't see in the shape. And again, feel free to pause and write these definitions down as you need to. So the hidden line, right, this hole here, I can't see that from the front, so we show that in our drawing with a hidden line. We've broken away part of the piece here, so this hole in the middle, you can see, I can see a little corner of it right here, so we have object line here, but this is hidden behind the face of this thing, so we have hidden line, that dashed line, showing that. All right, next up is a center line. So a center line is used to define the center of arcs, circles, or symmetric parts. So if you've got something that's like a mirror image and it's kind of important to know where the center is, that center line is a way to mark to the engineer, designer, manufacturer, artist, whatever, who's making something like, here's the center of it. And the reason a lot of those center lines are important, if you're going to drill a hole, let's say I'm going to make a hole in my notebook here. Well, I don't care about this distance from the edge. I want to know where the center is because that's where I'm going to put my drill. So a lot of times the center line is actually more important than how far over the edge of that feature is. Oh, and you'll notice it's not in the notes here, but if we see a circle, this is called a center mark here when we have essentially two center lines that come together. Okay, section lines. Section lines show where stuff has been cut. So this drawing only has this place cut off so we can kind of see the inside. So these are also called hatch lines. So this is, imagine that I made this by like starting with the full piece and cut a chunk off of it. The section lines would show where that was cut. Like I said, they're also called hatch lines. And you'll notice that if I kind of rip the front half of this off, I didn't actually cut here. So in the hole, no section lines, because that wasn't, if you imagine a saw cutting through this, it wouldn't have touched those here. Same with this hole here, right? So we don't see section lines there. But anywhere that saw cut would leave section lines behind. Short break line. So this shows where that cut is. So where we're going from the real actual thing to the piece that's been cut away. It's kind of a dark, squiggly or jagged line. A dimension line. So dimension lines, these are really important. We're looking now at this part of our drawing. Okay. So dimension lines go from one point to another. They have arrows showing how long something is. This is really important for manufacturers and construction to know what's the size of a thing that I'm making. And so you'll see the dimensions, the measurements in these dimension lines. So we'll talk more about those. They're really important, and rules on like where they go, what they measure. But yeah, those arrows show where they stop and start. And they go always with, or not always, but usually with extension lines. So extension lines show where that dimension starts and stopped. The reason for that is if I was trying to make this drawing and put all these measurements on top of this thing, drawing on top, this would get really messy. So we drop down extension lines to show where that measurement stops and starts. Okay, the long break line. So this is used to show this object is 12 inches long, but it doesn't look like this in the drawing. So uniform, if you think of uniform, people who wear uniforms all look the same, right? Uniform just means something's the same throughout. So if we've got this shape here, well, there's nothing changing throughout this. So this thing is 12 inches long. You'll notice that this line is nowhere near, almost 9-10 times as long as this one. But instead of drawing out this shape, I don't want to have to make that whole long shape. We can add a break line like this to kind of shorten it up. It allows us to save space and make the drawing a little bit bigger. And it's a way to show more details. Okay, leader lines, kind of obvious what they do. They lead you to something. So don't get confused by this pointing to a line. So it's kind of like we got a leader line to a leader line. Anyways, the leader line points to a feature. So in this case, it's pointing to the circle. And this is saying, here's the diameter of the circle. It's 2 inches. So that is what a leader line does. It kind of says like, hey, this is the thing I'm pointing to. It's usually used with arcs, circles, little details, things that you want to point out. And these lines usually go at an angle, so they don't get confused with dimension lines or extension lines. Okay, so these are conventions that kind of all engineers, architects, drafters, people maybe in construction, manufacturing would understand and agree upon, so that people can communicate their drawings and ideas better. One thing that you don't need to add this to your notes right now, there are rules that talk about line precedence. So if we have something like this shape here, it's kind of this weird like staircase thing with a hole cut out through it. So this would be the front view. If we look at the side view of it, right, we've got all these hidden lines, and this hole here, right, has a center line. Well, we would put a center line through here, but there's an object line because we see this step from the side. So the object line takes precedence. It means we don't draw both. You can't draw both lines in the same spot. So there's rules about, if 2 lines overlap, which line you actually draw. And usually it's object lines take precedence over pretty much everything. Okay, thanks for listening.